Do the Yankees have a realistic chance of getting Juan Soto? Do the Jets have a shot in hell to make the playoffs? These are just two topics that we're going to cover here on episode 7 of the BG Show, which starts right now. All right, everyone, welcome into episode 7 of the BG Show. My name is Bryce Gelman, and today there is certainly a lot to discuss, a lot to get to. I'm not going to be focusing on one specific team here. I intended to start with the New York Jets, who at least have a chance of making the playoffs. We know what the Giants are. We know what their future holds for this year. And that was obviously what I was going to come out and do. I was in Vegas this past weekend, hence the no release on Monday and Tuesday like I usually do, to talk about those two horrific franchises playing football in New York. But something just came out, and I'm recording this at around 4:45 on a Thursday, that the New York Yankees, according to Jeff Passan, have a good chance of going out and getting Juan Soto. The left-handed bat, let's just say, that the Yankees have ever so needed since 2017. Since the likes of Greg Bird were on the team. And this is music to my ears. Because on one hand, the Yankees could be getting a superstar generational talent that is still relatively young, and who is going to be hitting free agency at an age that we haven't seen in quite some time. The comparison, realistically, is Bryce Harper when he became a free agent in 2018. Juan Soto could be Bryce Harper and even more, especially at the plate. Now, do I trust Brian Cashman to get this done? Or let's put it this way. Do I trust Brian Cashman to ensure Yankees fans and the organization as a whole the best outcome in the end? No. Cashman sure could go out there, offer the Padres pennies on the dollar because they can't afford to pay him at the end of the year, and acquire Soto and put the Yankees in a good spot to succeed this upcoming year. Let's say they make a run at Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and they potentially get him. If they get him, it changes everything. But that remains to be seen, looking even more unlikely after Brian Cashman's comments the other day about Giancarlo Stanton, who shares the same agent as Yamamoto. So do I trust Brian Cashman to ensure the best outcome for this organization? No. But yes, he can go out and make this move. Now, Jeff Passan is a trustworthy guy. Most of the stuff he says, this is obviously should be taken with a grain of salt. He didn't say it's going to happen, but he said the Yankees have a good chance of going out and getting Soto. And that's all I need to hear. And for an organization that had such a disappointing and depressing season last year, I think this is what all Yankees fans need to hear at this point. The fact that the Yankees are actually going to go out and make a splash, and not sit back without a plan, without a big analytics department, as Brian Cashman said, and actually put this team in a realistic position to win. Because all these incremental moves, while your two best players, Aaron Judge and Cy Young winner Garrett Cole, are in their prime, aren't going to do anything. And they haven't done anything. They've just ensured 7 years of mediocrity. So a myriad of moves the Yankees could make this offseason that I guarantee you we will discuss on a week-to-week basis. But I had to open with that because it was the most pressing information. I also heard something about Passan saying that the Yankees are still interested in Brian Reynolds from the Pirates. But last I checked, last year, the Pirates asked for Jason Dominguez and Anthony Volpe in that trade, which is just absurd. Brian Reynolds is good, don't get me wrong, but he's not that good. So let's shift over to the New York Jets, who at 4-5 have they're plus 500 to make the playoffs at this point. They've got a quarterback in Zach Wilson, who has helped the Jets score 8 touchdowns in 9 games. A quarterback who has led the Jets to absolutely nothing, who has had a couple of good drives this season. The first drive out of the halftime break against the Chiefs. There were a couple of solid drives in that Eagles game, and then the last drive against the Giants. That's who we're talking about this year. And it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that this is. Give me a second. I had some complaints the last time I did one of these. I just want to make sure the volume's correct. There were a lot of complaints about this, but about Zach Wilson. And for good reason. Because Zach Wilson is a guy who has been thrust into this spotlight now 3 years in a row. And his play has amounted to nothing. Just the harsh criticism from Jets fans who just want to see their team win. And when someone on the team isn't helping their franchise win, they're going to let you know. And I don't see how there could be any remaining Zach Wilson truthers. Because there's one who's the head coach of the team. A head coach that a lot of fans are starting to sour on because of this indignance and because of this blind loyalty to Zach Wilson. And maybe it's coming from higher up. Maybe it's Joe Douglas saying, listen, I made this pick. We got to stand by him. Maybe it's Woody Johnson. Who knows at this point? All we know is that the Jets brass, the Jets organization, has made their bed. And instead of going with Trevor Siemian, who, let's just say this, if he was good enough, he'd be on the field. But instead of going with Siemian, they stick with Wilson, and they keep forcing this down our throats. And again, I was at the Jets game this past Sunday. I am not a Jets fan. I'm a Giants fan, but I do root for the Jets. Sue me. You can get mad at me, whatever you want to do. I root for New York teams, besides the Nets. And I feel for Jets fans. I feel their pain as a Knicks fan. Because I understand what it's like to be rooting for an incompetent organization for my entire life. So I get their cause. I get why they are the way that they are. But what I saw on Sunday firsthand was, I mean, and look, you got to give credit to Jets fans. They travel well. It looked like there were more Jets fans there than Raiders fans. I guess that's what you get when you change cities. Shout out John Fisher, who's about to move the Athletics to Vegas, and they will have 0 fans. There were a lot of Jets fans there. And as I said, they want their team to win, just like every other team. But something that Jets fans have year after year is they have hope. And whether or not you want to call it false hope, I mean, that's really up in the air, and that's all subjective, but they have hope. And they have been dealt an awful hand. The worst hand you could possibly get. Zach Wilson as your quarterback 4 plays into the year. And Zach Wilson didn't have the worst game. The Jets should have scored twice in that second half. Both were called back due to the penalties. And I had to watch all these Jets fans jump all up and down, only for both times the flag signal popped up on the Jumbotron. And it's like, when is enough enough? It wasn't Zach's fault, okay? 8 touchdowns in 9 games? You're going to tell me that that's the fault of the head coach? That's the fault of Nathaniel Hackett? That's the fault of the Jets' lack of solid receivers? No. They play a small part in all of this. And we have seen good quarterbacks do well with nothing in the past. And the Jets' offensive line isn't awful anymore. It is not their Achilles heel like everyone expected it to be. The quarterback has been the Achilles heel. Because the Jets' defense has been nothing short of extraordinary. They are the number one ranked PFF, or number 1 ranked defense according to PFF. That's better than the 49ers, and that's better than the Cowboys. And what do they have to show from that? 4-5. I get it. Jets fans, I understand your pain. And it doesn't seem to be getting any better. But wait. It could get better in the fantasy of one 39-year-old quarterback. Aaron Rodgers says this past week, it actually comes out, I think, during the game. I opened my phone and saw a notification that Aaron Rodgers plans on coming back in mid-December. Aaron Rodgers, a 39-year-old man, says he's going to be ready to come back in mid-December. The injury happened on September 11th. September, October, November. 3 months. 3 months. For an injury that was expected to end his season and potentially his career. Why? Why, if you're the New York Jets, would you have Aaron Rodgers come back this season? I get it. You've got a generational defense. You've got an incredible running back in Bryce Hall. You have an improving offensive line. A lot of things are looking up for your franchise. But do you really want to go all in with a 39-year-old quarterback coming back from one of the toughest injuries that you can have in all of sports in record time, in an amount of time that no professional athlete has ever come back in? And you expect a 39-year-old Aaron Rodgers to do what Cam Akers did in half the time. I feel for Cam Akers. He just tore his other Achilles. I was originally going to come on here and say, well, look what happened, but I realized it was in the other Achilles, which is just brutal. But it's a possibility that you're sending a 39-year-old quarterback who can't possibly be fully healed from an injury of that severity in 3 months. You're going to send him back out on the field after everything he said about this organization, after everything he said trying to keep the false hope alive for Jets fans, and expect him to not get re-injured? To lead this team to victory? Because right now the Jets are plus 500 to make the playoffs. The Jets have the Bills, Dolphins, Falcons, Texans, and then the Dolphins again. They have a Bills team that's itching to get back to the playoffs. That's a must-win game. Even more must-win than the Jets have in the next 5 weeks. They beat the Bills before, I get it. It was a miraculous win. They did it for Aaron Rodgers. They did it for the significance of the date that the game was played. And that was a huge win. And it gave Jets fans that false hope, but I don't think that there should be any hope about this upcoming game against the Bills. On the road, up in Buffalo. This is a legacy game for Josh Allen. And I cannot see a circumstance in which the Jets will go up to Buffalo and win that game. So let's say you're 4-6 going into next week. And then you got the Dolphins, Falcons, Texans, and the Dolphins again. Why would you risk the career of Aaron Rodgers to save a season that has already been lost? 4-6 going into that Dolphins game. The Dolphins have been feasting on teams under 500. They've yet to win a game against a team over 500. So the Dolphins are probably going to win both of those games, if not 1 out of 2. So that puts you 2 games under 500. And then you got the Falcons, which the Jets should beat, right? And the Texans, who have this rising superstar in CJ Stroud. They're playing out of their minds, and they look like a tough team to beat. They have completely turned this franchise around. And that's not an easy game anymore for the Jets, like it looked like on paper going into this season. Why would you risk the career of Aaron Rodgers just to save an already lost season? I know I just said it, but it's crazy to me that there are Jets fans out there who want this. It doesn't make much sense, and it doesn't make much sense for Jets fans to sit here and expect things to change this year. I know it's unfortunate. I know the injury to Rodgers, I said it right when it happened. I couldn't believe it. It took me at least 2 to 3 weeks to get over the fact that happened, because I think a lot of people were intrigued and excited, even non-Jets fans, to see what Aaron Rodgers would do in New York. You know, playing in Green Bay his entire career and coming to the Jets, being on Hard Knocks, all the fanfare, all the hoopla that surrounded Aaron Rodgers trade to the Jets. But it does not. It shouldn't make any Jets fans feel any better. It's like the possibility of it happening shouldn't make Jets fans sleep better at night. Because even if he does, at that point, the Jets are going to be what, plus 1,000, plus 1,200 to make the playoffs? It's not happening. It's a fever dream. And I get it. I understand that Jets fans want something to latch onto. They want something to hold on to. And that sliver of hope is not something you should hold on to. It's the hope for next season that your defense returns most of its players, that your offense could improve at least slightly, especially with your receivers. Your offensive line continues to make leaps, and you get Aaron Rodgers back next year, who actually has enough time to heal a severe injury. And just like this year, you go into next year with Super Bowl aspirations. Nothing changes. But let's say you do send Aaron Rodgers out there in a long shot to make the playoffs. You look to him to save your season, and he gets hurt again. He re-tears his Achilles. That's it. Aaron Rodgers is done for his career. So you wasted 2 to 3 years on Aaron Rodgers just because you wanted to throw him out there to try to win some games to make the playoffs. Let's face it. A non-100% Aaron Rodgers who can't scramble, who can't get outside of the pocket, who can't make throws on the run, is not an Aaron Rodgers that is going to lead you to anything. So you have to accept reality here. If you're Joe Douglas, if you're a Jets fan, if you're Robert Saleh, if you're anyone on this team, or if you're a fan of the organization. And speaking of accepting your reality, that's exactly what the New York Giants do and have been doing and will do, starting Tommy DeVito, the biggest story before Sunday's games. I don't know how. I guess the media saw an opportunity to make this a story, and I guess it is a story. You know, the kid's living at home. His mom's cooking for him. He gets free chicken cutlets. Doesn't have to pay rent. His mom makes his bed. I actually relate to the guy. Still living at home after graduating college in May. I get it. It's relatable. It's cool. His whole family was at the game, cheering him on. And guess what? The Giants got absolutely stomped by the Dallas Cowboys. And I feel bad for any person who sat through that entire game. And any of the Giants fans who traveled down to Dallas to watch that thrashing in person. I did watch some of that game. And I did have to turn it off after a short period of time. And yes, I did go back and watch the highlights. I don't think there's anything to rehash from the game. I don't think there's anything to talk about with the fights after the game or, during the game with Sterling Shepard and Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton, a guy who doesn't usually show much emotion, who was clearly heated, and who wouldn't be heated. You're on a team that had playoff aspirations, that won a playoff game last year, and guess what? That's how your season went this year, or at least that's how it's going. But I'm happy. And I don't want to sit here and pour gasoline on the fire. I'm here to put out the fire. I'm here to put out all of the concerns from Giants fans out there. Because for the first time in a long, long time, a New York team is tanking at the correct time. I said it last week. I'll say it next week, the week after, until the draft. Now, this is the best thing that could have happened to the Giants this year. I know it's crazy to say. I know that there's Giants fans out there saying, how could you want them to lose? That's not what I said. As a fan, you never want your team to lose. But I consider myself a realistic fan and someone who could look my team up and down for what they are and see what's the best possible outcome. Doesn't have to be something that I want. But after the Giants got out to a terrible start this year, their offensive line was in disarray. They couldn't block me. Daniel Jones gets hurt. Tyrod Taylor gets hurt, and Tommy DeVito becomes the starting quarterback. So instead of the Giants having to go out of their way to lose, they're just going to lose by playing football, by playing their hardest, by continuing to develop their young talent. I don't know what anyone was realistically expecting from the Giants coming off last year. Realistically, the Giants made incremental changes on both sides of the ball. They didn't have the resources to get that much better. Bobby Okereke was their main acquisition, and he has played extremely well this year. But what has that done? Yes, the defense is a little bit better, but you still have the worst offensive line, or one of the worst offensive lines in football, and that's been a recurring theme for the Giants for the last 5-10 years. You can go back, 8-9 years on this. And I think all of us as Giants fans thought they could build off last year. But the reality of the situation is that the Giants got the short end of the stick this year. Their schedule was extremely tough. That's what will give them the tiebreaker over most teams that they'll be tied with that are finishing at the bottom of the league in the draft. So let's take a step back and let's breathe a sigh of relief. Because for the first time in a long time, the Giants will have the opportunity to draft their franchise quarterback. Whether it be Caleb Williams, Drake May, they are going to do that. Unless the Giants decide, for whatever reason, that they're going to stick with Daniel Jones and draft Marvin Harrison. But even then, you're getting a generational wide receiver. This is good. This draft is stacked, especially with the quarterbacks. And the Giants will have the opportunity to drastically improve their chances to win going forward. And hey, they may get an easier schedule next year because they didn't do that well this year. They won't get as many primetime games next year because of how terrible they are this year. Maybe the NFL is a little afraid. Well, I mean, if they get Caleb Williams, they're going to be in a bunch of primetime games. I don't even know what I'm saying, but there is a chance the Giants can make huge changes, huge positive leaps going forward based off this awful season. I know it hurts. I know it sucks to watch your team on a week-by-week basis completely crap the bed. I understand. But it's not worst-case scenario. Worst-case scenario is Daniel Jones doesn't get hurt and your team wins 5 to 6 games. And it doesn't put you in good enough position to get any one of these top quarterbacks. And let's say you got to trade up to get one of those guys. You give up assets for next year. You give up assets for the year after. And where does that leave you? You lack assets, and you don't have any idea of what the quarterback you traded up for will turn out to be. At least the Giants will have their choice of who they want. At least 2 of those names they'll have the choice of. So I'm not playing boy who cried wolf right now, but I'm also not going to sit here and tell you that this is all sunshine and rainbows, because it isn't. And as a fan, you're allowed to sit by and be upset about what your team turned out to be, the expectations that were not met. I understand. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm not upset as well, but I'm choosing to make the best of an awful situation, because this is a good opportunity going forward for the New York Giants. A real opportunity to put this team in position to compete for years to come. If they get it right and they draft their franchise quarterback, I guarantee you every single Giants fan will look back at this year and be happy that they went through what we're witnessing right now because of what it turned out to be and what it got the Giants in the long run. And that's an actual franchise quarterback. And Daniel Jones isn't that. He's a solid, serviceable quarterback, but he's a guy taken way too high in the draft and a guy who hasn't met expectations. And whether it be the injuries, the offensive line, the lack of wide receivers. There have been excuses made, and I've certainly played into those excuses. But you don't need the best offensive line in the league. You don't need the best receivers in the league to excel, to succeed, to thrive. It's unfortunate. I get it. You could be hurt if you're a Giants fan. You could be upset at me for even saying this. I get it. And I understand there are two sides to every story and every situation. And I understand that that's the case with this. So enough Giants. Wanted to get into the Knicks today, but I'm going to do a Knicks-centered episode within my next 1 or 2 episodes, potentially put that out tomorrow or Monday. Plenty to talk about with the Knicks, but I didn't want to oversaturate this video. We've already gotten to a lot. Save the callers and the text, the messages for the next episode. We try to keep that team on a team-by-team basis, team-centered, because, we talk about so much on the show, and I'd like to keep that specified when I can. All right, so that'll do it for episode 7 of the BG show. There are going to be a lot of things to talk about in the coming days and weeks. I get it. You got 2 football organizations in the city who don't have much hope right now, but we'll find stuff to talk about. And with the Yankees and the Mets going after these big free agents, the hot stove will be heating up, and the Knicks are playing pretty good basketball. So don't worry. There'll be a lot to talk about. All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you on the next episode of the BG Show.